Welcome back to the BlackLetter podcast. We set out to create an entertaining and exciting podcast about law and business, and I think we've done it. BlackLetter, the name, comes from the Gothic typeset that was originally used in the Gutenberg press. Over time, BlackLetter became the only font that English law books were printed in. Everything else was printed in regular type. It made it harder for kind of the common person to understand what the English law book said. BlackLetter came to represent something that was law, that was set in stone, that was sort of old and a well-settled fundamental principle of law. We're here to demystify BlackLetter law. We're here to demystify things that happen in business and law and where those two meet. And I hope you have fun listening. What's the most important thing for a sports team that wants to bring an athlete to the United States to think about? I mean, whether it's culturally or from a legal perspective, or how do we do that? How do we do that successfully?
Well, legally, it's going to be a little more formal, but just getting the paperwork together. It always comes down to the paperwork and making the case that this person has a reputation.
Right.
And that they're going to do something in the United States. It's not enough to just come to the United States to be here and a presence. You have to come and do something, whether it's coaching, whether it's playing, whether it's educating, teaching, whatever it is. You have to have a plan going forward. They're not going to just take you because you're you. You have to contribute something to you.
I got to look at it more on the side of sports being a great unifier, in the world, right? And you look at some of the events and some of the athletes, and you have other countries rooting for that player who's playing in America, and there's a communication, there's a talk between each other. And then when they go back, they realize, the people that you thought were a certain stereotype isn't that stereotype. And you see that there's a whole nother side of it. So I look at it from that perspective, that sports can be a great unifier of all nations. And, you just look at the Olympics.
It essentially means that you are under the jurisdiction of the court. It means that when you pass away, your executor, who's the person who manages your affairs when you pass away, they have to go to the court. They have to qualify as executor. They pay some court fees. Mm-hmm. They pay a probate tax. Mm-hmm. And then they are under the jurisdiction of someone called the Commissioner of Accounts until that estate is wrapped up. So that is I've seen probates that are 17 years old, but that's a nightmare. Usually it's, 1 to 3 years, just on average.
So instead of getting your heirs getting the assets right away, it takes 1 to 3 years, you're paying some taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So
and you're paying fees as well. You're paying
fees to the commissioner
a couple $100 or a couple thousand if they have a lot of assets.
Just to look at your stuff.
Advice that I give business owners is business owners work in their business. They don't realize how valuable their business is, and they often have no plan to pay estate tax on their business. Mm-hmm. Businesses are not always, again, something you can easily sell. And if that's where all the money is, they must have a plan to address the estate tax.
Yep.
And especially when a business is hugely successful and it continues to grow in value. So right now, for example, I have a client, he came in, his business is very successful. I suggested to him that we start gifting some of the shares of the business out of his estate to his children so we can freeze some of the value outside of his taxable estate. So even if it continues, and it's going to continue to grow, it'll grow outside of his taxable estate.
Of course, developing this, we went through a deep dive. I think 2 4-inch binder notebooks of content, single spaced details, in order to make certain that our pleadings weren't general in nature and that we weren't spending their money to go after a rival or to go after something that would be dismissed later on, but rather we were doing our due diligence in advance, as Rule 11 would require and Rule 10.
Somebody watching this podcast, if they're a CEO of a cybersecurity company or the CEO of a company that hires a cybersecurity company, like a defense contractor or something like that, any big takeaways from a global perspective, from a NATO perspective, that you could share?
More from the commercial side. I've dealt in the worldwide distribution business for probably 20 years. Even as the J3 at Transcom, the majority of the lift that we got was from the commercial sector. And we in the military increasingly looked at the information management in the commercial realm on backbones that were very established, and to try and expand that to the moving forward in those structures that
What
we had.
steps could a company take to get ahead of that? I mean, you're a commercial company. You have to worry about your data. You can't. We've obviously got ITAR and we've got export issues with data, but your data is all over the place when it's on the internet, right?
Yeah.
How does a company get ahead of something like that from a practical standpoint, from a legal standpoint? How do those two things interplay?
So practically and legally, Tom, right at the outset, all companies have to understand that they are part of a vast information network that's undergoing really a global revolution right now. And that global revolution is described really best in one phrase, is hyperconnectivity.
Okay.
So if you are a company even doing a small amount of business over the internet, you are connected to that system, which is global in nature. And so as a consequence, if you understand as a company that your intersection with that network then exposes you to a whole realm of threats, the very threats that both Bob and General Fletcher outlined, that's the
I think
first.
that the relationship for me would be the most important thing. Sounds like that drives both of you guys, makes you such good partners that you're both kind of
it really does,
relationship.
and it's incumbent on us to be as efficient,
Right.
both time and cost as we can. The Rocket Mortgage is a good example, because after you satisfy the parameters of that mortgage,
Right.
everybody says that it's done based on the premise that circumstances are fixed. There's a loan amount. This is my house. I'm going to live here. I'm going to make mortgage payments.
Right.
A comparable transaction on the commercial side has multiple times more variables, and those variables, some are fixed, some are in flux.
Right.
And so the influx is the part where the personal relationship allows us to be nimble, to modify and shift.
As the business changes, to change the relationship.
The only way you can modify your Rocket Mortgage is to pay it off and go get another one.
Yeah.
That may not be totally correct, but it's fundamentally.
And it has its place, in the home mortgage, it's a little
Right,
different.
I realize it's
than
not
where
commercial lending.
But
Rocket mortgage is
it's
consumer.
an important
Yeah, for sure.
distinction, because
Yeah.
in the home mortgage, it's one of the most important investments someone makes. But it's one of the most important investments they make for their family with their family. Most people don't go into it thinking, oh, I hope my banking relationship is solid on this, in the same way they do in a business relationship. Because if you're forming a business or you're starting something in that, you're going out beyond. Everybody's got to live somewhere. That one's kind of a known entity, but not everybody starts their own business. Not everybody runs or expands. And most people that do don't start a business to operate X. They want to start it. They want it to succeed. They want to grow it. They may want to sell it. They may want to evolve it to something else. They may want to buy another one. In all of these things, in the business context, the growth and the change is part of the initial thought going into it, and that's where having someone who is going to be a partner in that enterprise and work with you in all of that is so much more important, because it's going to change. You've anticipated that
Tell
from
me
the
about
outset.
when you joined the firm was filing more trademarks than any other law firm in the United States.
Yes.
And had a sort of jumbled structure for the process of filing trademarks. I think it filed 1,400 trademarks in the U.S., or registered 1,400, filed 3,500 last year. How did you detangle that web? And did you have to learn about trademarks?
Yes. Sometimes I joke when, I came into the law firm initially, I knew, what's the difference between a trademark and a copyright? I had no idea. So it was part of the process of learning. I went into that.
But now you know.
I know a lot more than I know a lot. Sometimes I hear people talking, I'm like, oh, that's not a copyright. That's a trademark, so it's kind of, now my news feed is filled with trademark stuff, which is kind of scary. It used to be aviation stuff. Now it's trademark or, business law, employment law. So, it's interesting. But I think you have to get involved to be able to solve the problems. And I think managers or anybody at any level, if you don't know how to do it yourself and understand what's going on, you can't solve the problem.
I hear provisional patent. Is there such a thing?
Yeah. So,
do I own a provisional patent? Can I?
I see what you're saying. So, technically, it's not a patent. It's never going to grant. But a provisional patent is important for those inventors who don't want to spend a whole lot of money on it but want to test the product. So if somebody comes to me and they say, I don't really know if this is going to be a good product, I don't know if it's going to sell well, I really don't want to invest a whole lot into it, that's what I'll recommend is a provisional patent. It gets their filing date with the patent office and it gives them 12 months to try and sell it in the market and see how well it does. And as long as they file a non-provisional utility, which is the actual patent application, within the 12 months, what happens is the non-provisional utility will backdate to the provisional application.
So it relates back to that. So you're essentially your utility application, even though you file it 6 months after you file your provisional, the date of that utility is the date that you filed your provisional.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the provisional is a good way of preventing yourself from missing that 12-month bar, right? So you file a provisional, then you start selling it, and you'll have a filing date that's before whenever
What
you
is
start.
it what's the principal driving piece of advice that you give? I know you represent some athletes right now that are in the NBA and things like that. So what do you tell them when you first meet with them? Hey, here are the gotchas and here's what we need to do for you. What's the most important?
Well, we start off with, for a while, we didn't want to make that our focus is to do athletes, because I've been on the other side where guys would come into the locker room that someone sent them in there, and immediately they're trying to get all the athletes.
Right.
If that guy's crooked, the player ends up getting a bunch of deals from his friends, and then he scatters, and the player's left with a bunch of broken hearts. So first thing we do is we just try to say, okay, what are you trying to do? Similar to you, what are you trying to do with your life? Where are you looking at in the future? This is what you have, and ultimately get a snapshot of where they're at now.
Okay.
And give them a snapshot of where they could be in the future, given what they're doing now. If you're spending $100,000 a year, it may look good when you got $10 million in the bank, but over time, if you're not doing anything else, or you keep giving out money, or you're doing whatever, it's gonna at the end of 10 years, 15 years.
Can people still immigrate to the United States? I mean, it sounds like they can't. We don't want any immigrants because we're putting a wall around the whole country, right?
Sure.
Or a fence. I'm not clear what we're doing.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
You can immigrate to the United States. The important thing, one of the first things I tell every client, whether it's business, family, or whoever, one of the first things I tell them is that U.S. immigration law is designed to keep people out. The reason I say that, the first line in the Immigration and Nationality Act is the U.S. government assumes that you are trying to immigrate to the United States. The practical effect of that line is that we're going to do everything to try to keep you out. I say this in part, though, to jolt clients to a sense of reality that you can immigrate to the United States, but it's not going to be easy. You have to have your ducks in a row. You have to have your paperwork in a row. You have to have, if you get an attorney you can trust, you have to trust them and provide all the information that you can possibly provide to allow them to strategize in the best possible way.
I was talking to a real estate person the other day about the issue of safety at open houses. Have you ever heard? So I didn't even realize this was an issue either. But safety of the real estate agents themselves. When you have an open house, it's like, hey, anybody who sees this sign on the road, please come into this private place and we'll close the doors. Yeah, I mean, thinking about it now as an ex-prosecutor, I'm like, wow, that is a potential invitation to some bad stuff. Have you guys seen that, or is that an issue that you deal with?
It is an issue. We cover our agents' safety extensively in our policy manual, but in also our training. One of the standard things is, you tell the agents, when you're showing the property, you keep everyone going ahead of you into the rooms.
Right.
You don't walk into a room where they can just slam the door and you have no way out. So there's a lot of things that you have to just, be thinking about, because at the end of the day, you're right with, nowadays a lot of, consumers, buyers, sellers, or buyers, you're not meeting them until you're at the property or they walk into your open house.
Especially in terms of what happened with iTunes. So what I understand is, as of September, iTunes is gone. So what happened to all of the iTunes purchases everybody's made, all the songs we've bought?
I believe they'll still be locally on your machine, but now they're replacing iTunes with 4 apps, is my understanding.
Okay.
A podcast app, a music streaming app, I forget what the other ones are, but essentially trying to morph themselves into becoming Spotify.
Okay.
Which again is devaluing music, because at least in the case of iTunes, you were paying something for something tangible, a download.
Right. Yeah.
Now you're paying, Apple's adopting Spotify's model and saying, pay us a subscription per month, and you can stream all the music that's ever been made by mankind.
Right, and all
So
the,
that's another
all of the
devaluing.
films, all of the movies. So you're not going to buy movies on the iTunes store anymore.
That's correct. That's the other one. That's going to be a special TV, Apple TV, and Apple.
Yeah, Apple TV's already popped up. It's already a thing on the Apple Store.
So I believe what's happened to music is going to happen to film. It's just happening more slowly.
What's the next big thing for you guys?
Well, we're really focused on small business. That's a large percentage of our volume. We also do a lot of help with estate plans for people, wills and trusts. You mentioned intellectual property, something that you're very involved with. But really, a lot of people are starting their own businesses, and it speaks to the economy and just the state of employment in general. So what we're laser focused on is how we can help entrepreneurs, people looking to start their own businesses, not only, get set up, do the proper formation, make sure everything is all taken care of through the Secretary of State, which we help them a great deal with and have over the years. But the new focus is how can we help you run your business? There's a lot that goes on after the formation. The first three months of starting any business are critical. Getting established, getting everything set up the right way. Are you hiring employees? Do you need tax consultations? Do you need insurance?
You had something to do with killing Osama bin Laden, which is pretty cool. I think actually I heard at the partner retreat, it was one of the big wins in the last few years. One of your big wins was you killed Osama bin Laden. I thought that was kind of interesting. So tell me about that. How did you help get that guy?
Obviously I didn't kill Osama bin Laden. They worked with the military, Osama bin Laden. They worked with the military, SEAL team to go in there and actually conduct the operation. But with respect to the operation, there were a number of legal issues that we wanted to make sure were resolved and worked through first. We wanted to be able to demonstrate, or I should say that the CI General Counsel was Stephen Preston at the time, wanted to be able to demonstrate that we had thought all these issues through before the operation, and we were not sort of reconstructing and justifying actions.
The greatest question I've ever received from anybody I've ever talked to was a kid asked me, what's the newest thing in employment law? And I thought for a second, and I pulled out my phone. I said, this is it. And they said, why? So because everything that goes on right now is memorialized.
Yeah.
Whether you've done something good or bad. And one of these kids started, well, that's illegal. I said, no, it's not. You're putting this in the public domain. And if it comes down to, I've got 2 employees or 2 candidates, I'm trying to figure out who I want to hire.
And they're both the same.
Right.
Apples.
They both have almost identical experience, educational background. They're great. And then I start Googling them, and on one of them, all I see is pictures of them throwing up in trash cans. And the other one I see working with big brothers and big sisters and the rescue puppies. Who am I going to hire?
Yeah, so we'd say, sounds interesting, and we'd invite you in.
Thanks.
Yes.
That's my Slack back to you.
Yeah, we'd invite you in, and we'd really want to drill down on what your business will be. And you have to identify how you're going to differentiate yourself in the market, what your market will be, what your audience will be, what your costs are to get this off the ground.
Are you saying I need to make a business plan before I start a business?
Yeah.
This sounds suspiciously like work.
It sounds like the 20th century to write a business plan, but everything's on PowerPoint now. But yes, you need a plan of what your business will be.
Okay.
And and you need to identify all the steps it'll take to get to that
Be on the
business.
front end. Get your trademarks and be the enforcer, not the enforcee.
Right.
You're starting a new brewery, do your due diligence and get your trademarks first. Because I think some of that process bakes in reviewing and making sure you're not using anybody else's mark, and you're not going to get that letter and spend all that money to change your brand.
We had a local restaurant that for a brief time they wanted us to do a private label for their restaurant, and I won't say which restaurant. Great place, great guys, but they had a concept and they wanted to call it something loco for Loudoun County, and it's like Four Loko is a beverage, right? Like no, you can't use loco, and I think that basically killed it for me. They were really intent on calling this product like loco something, and I was like, well, we're going to have to own it. We're going to have to trademark it.
And you're going to
that's never going to happen, right? We were going to put out a product called Gray Ghost at one time, right? And that's too close to Gray Goose, right? Gray Ghost is the nickname for John Mosby. And but it's too close.
It's trying to make sure your stuff is correct and right. And is there anything you can do?
Yeah, there's several things you can do. I think the biggest one that most companies mess up on or fail to do is have a implemented document destruction policy. You're not allowed to destroy evidence once a case has been initiated, but if you have a routine policy that every 18 months you purge your email archives, just as a matter of policy to save server space and so forth, then you don't have such a backlog. When you get into court and they ask for every email concerning such and such a topic, you only have what you have. And as long as you sort of have a policy in writing that's implemented on a routine basis, that will really... So yeah, we've got this search report for American Bully Brewing to see what other registrations and other uses of similar names there are. So that's where we start, is by looking through that report. And we'll see a lot of stuff on here. There's...
So what are you looking for, David, when you look at the search report?
So we're looking for a couple of things, but the primary one is whether the same name or a similar name is already taken. If somebody's already using the same name or something really similar, that's going to prevent you from getting any protection on your beer and on your brewery name.
That's all for today's episode of BlackLetter. Thanks again for listening. Join us next time when we talk about more BlackLetter issues in creative ways. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Google Play so you never miss an episode. And to catch us on video, check out our website at blackletterstudios.com.